What film should I review today? No. Yeah, a Kevin Smith film. Yeah. From which era? Ah, the original Jersey trilogy. A lot of good ones in there. But which one? Ah, fuck!
Not another reviewer.
Yes, another reviewer. Before I begin, let me just preface this by saying that I love Kevin Smith's films. My aspirations to become a filmmaker began with being shown Clerks and Mallrats in my teenage years, but it seems that old Silent Bob needs to take a page from Gaben's book and avoid the number 3. For some reason, every third movie Kevin Smith makes just isn't good. I mean, it's not terrible, but they just aren't good, with the exclusion of the one I want to talk about today. That's probably why I haven't put any effort into seeing the movie Cop Out. The film I'm talking about today is Chasing Amy, released in 1997, and of course written and directed by Kevin Smith, and it stars Ben Affleck, Joey Lauren Adams, Jason Lee, and Dwight Ewell. As for the cast, that's really it. I mean, Ben Affleck plays Holden McNeil, a comic book artist for Blunt Man and Chronic, whose life is his work as he portrays himself as the responsible and confident one between him and his friend of 20 years, the inker for the comic, Banky Edwards, played by Jason Lee. Banky constantly uses homophobic insults and has a rage problem. The love interest for Holden is Alyssa Jones, played by Joey Lauren Adams, who is a fellow comic book artist. She's a lesbian with a very interesting past that becomes a major point in the movie. Her, Holden, and Banky have a mutual friend, Hooper X, another comic book artist that, for the sake of sales, portrays himself as an over-the-top militant racist when he's actually soft-spoken, articulate, and gay. Jay and Silent Bob, portrayed by Jason Mewes and Kevin Smith, require no explanation, but in case they do, Jay is an outspoken drug dealer with a propensity for spewing profanity for no reason and talking about absolutely nothing, while Silent Bob rarely speaks, but when he does, he attempts to make it as deep and insightful as possible. I have an issue with most of these characters, as none of them are really relatable or likable. You warm up to a character, then they push that limit of douchery, stupidity, or decency that just changes your opinion. This is coming from a guy that thought Dante and Randall from Clerks were decent guys. Holden and Banky attend a convention in New York for their comic, where you're first introduced to Banky's rage when he's accused of being a tracer by a character played by Scott Mosier, their producer. They visit Hooper while his plan is in progress, where they play along with his act, which ends with Banky getting shot and the entire audience fleeing. This is when Hooper introduces Alyssa to Holden and Banky, then they go to a bar where a ridiculous conversation about Archie of Archie Comics fame is gay in an attempt to portray Banky as a raging homophobe. But this kind of falls flat. At this point, the movie makes a decision for you. Do you follow Banky and Hooper in their trip to the comic book store, or stay with Alyssa and Holden? Now this is a Kevin Smith movie, so you're probably going to be more interested in the comics. But unfortunately, the movie makes the wrong decision, and you're stuck with it. We get to watch Holden and Alyssa bond. After the first confrontation, where things go well, Hooper invites Holden and Banky out again, enticing him to go by saying Alyssa will be there. Banky tags along, of course. The two continue their awkward courtship when Alyssa is requested to sing on stage with the band. She does so, and the song is boring. It's not bad, it's just boring. Directly after the song, she proceeds to make out with a woman that just so happened to have started dancing in front of Holden and Banky during her song, revealing Alyssa is a lesbian. The next 20 minutes of this film is essentially how do lesbians work? It's not normal, quote unquote, with millions of references from the first 2 movies, since that's how you write a script, apparently. Her and Banky hit it off in this scene, which makes no sense since he has nothing but scorn for her through the rest of the movie, and then Holden drags him off after his confidence has been shattered. She shows up at his apartment and they begin to build a friendship. Banky tells Holden that one day he's going to have to choose between the two of them, because he can't stand being without his friends so much. Holden then goes to confess his love to Alyssa, in a speech that just goes on way too long and actually kind of takes the wrong direction, but somehow they end up in love and together. All of her stereotypical lesbian friends don't like this idea, so she stays with Holden. Alyssa later explains her change of heart by saying that she didn't want to rule out her own gender and finding the one for her, but then Holden came along and changed all that. Banky confronts Holden about a nickname from Alyssa's senior yearbook, Finger Cuffs, she got from having a three-way with two guys in high school. And of course, Holden's confidence is shattered for a second time. He discusses what he's found out with Hooper, as well as the issues he's having with Banky, and Hooper just simply pushes him to discuss his problems with the respective people involved. Cue Holden and Alyssa at a hockey game as he pussyfoots around the subject. When he does come out directly with it, she pussyfoots around the subject, so he pussyfoots around again until she comes right out and says it. Then gets angry at him for not coming right out and asking, even though he did roughly 20 seconds before she yelled at him for not doing it. Again, she storms off, as she's known to do at this point, and in a scene very reminiscent of the 37 joke from Clerks, the two argue. Alyssa admits that she was incredibly deceptive and ambiguous about her past, and Holden walks away from the relationship. Holden becomes the focus, showing how crushed he is despite being the one who walked away, as he meets Jay and Silent Bob to pay them for use of their likenesses in Blunt Man and Chronic. They seem to be here for two reasons: to antagonize Holden, which at this point I'm sure everyone wants to do, and so Silent Bob can impart his wisdom on the subject, explaining that he went through the same thing when he was chasing Amy. After that, the most likable characters in the movie leave. Holden decides the only way to relieve tensions between Alyssa, Banky, and his own sense of self-worth is to have a three-way amongst them. He kisses Banky to make him realize that his jealousy towards Alyssa is because he's homosexual and in love with him. Alyssa refuses the three-way because she loves Holden and doesn't want to cater to his infantile mindset to have him. At this point, the three of them part ways, and then 1 year later, Banky is still in the business alone doing a comic called Baby Dave. He hasn't heard from Holden since their awkward encounter, yet he just shows up, and the two have a wordless moment where Holden congratulates Banky on his success, and Banky directs Holden to Alyssa's booth. Holden goes to her and gives her the comic he's been working on, Chasing Amy. She seems to display a more subdued and subtle demeanor than the rest of the film, while he's still pussyfooting and passive towards everything. This movie has nothing to do with what's actually happening in the movie. It refers to Silent Bob's story and his experience. The character that has about 5 minutes of screen time. I want to see that movie. Twice the movie discusses relationships that aren't explored in the film. Hooper and Banky, and then Silent Bob and Amy. I want to know more about them. Why did we end up with a boring relationship out of all of them? I mean, yeah, Hooper and Banky didn't actually get together in this film, and it wasn't even revealed until Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, but the chemistry was actually there in this movie! Most of Holden and Alyssa's romantic scenes lacked chemistry. It just feels forced. He underacts, she overacts. It only seems to be in the scenes where they're together. Other than that, Holden is entertaining. I mean, for the first 20 minutes of the movie before he starts to let his shallow insecurities surface, Banky is an incredibly funny character, but the homophobia is played to an uncomfortable point. Like they pushed it as far as they possibly could, and it just felt like Banky had something seriously wrong with him that was totally ignored. Alyssa was very vague and ambiguous about herself, her past and her sexuality. It seemed too black and white, but then in the end it wasn't, because she hid everything and got worked up when she was questioned about it. Even though she maintains that she'll answer any question honestly, but she never does! There were at least 2 occasions where Holden asked her questions point blank that he later found out she lied about. Hooper X also had flaws, though in the grand scheme they were very minor, which out of the main cast makes him the most likable. He portrayed himself as a militant African-American supremacist for comic book sales and manipulated Holden to get Banky to a lesbian club. It interests me a little bit that Kevin Smith can write a convincing gay man, but a gay woman is another task entirely. The voice of reason for this film were Jay and Silent Bob. No, not just Silent Bob. Jay even makes an incredibly good point by saying, Alyssa's done with all that wild shit, now she's ready to settle down. Fucking Jay says that, and Holden still fucks it up. When Alyssa decided to be with Holden after running off, then jumping into his arms just seemed to undermine her as a character entirely. She had identified herself entirely by her sexuality, but then she drops that almost immediately when Holden confesses his love. And as for her soft-spoken explanation for why she chose to be with him, doesn't make any fucking sense. At this point in the film, as she says she didn't want to miss out on the one she loves by ruling out her own gender, But then Holden came along, and that effectively, rules out the opposite gender. So there really was no point to what she said at all. When Holden comes up with his solution to fix everything, it shows that this point that he has shown no personal growth whatsoever. And because he can't seem to grow, that no one can grow. But it's confusing because he thinks he's grown. This manifests in how he thinks Alyssa will jump into another three-way, even though she wouldn't because she has grown. And he expects Banky to just come to terms with his homosexuality immediately. Tacking on the 1 year later to see where our characters are after this encounter and what lessons they've learned seemed cheap, since you really got no context and it felt unnecessary. Everyone has moved on and is doing just as they were doing before, except for Holden, who has faded into obscurity and is alone. I guess the whole moral is, neglect your job and your friends so you can get a lesbian to fall in love with you, then the high you feel from converting her will eventually cause your house of cards to fall right apart, and you'll end up drawing up a constant reminder of how shallow, insecure, and stupid you are, and maybe someday you'll realize how unoriginal you are since you got not one, but two comic book ideas off the same duo of drug dealers. Did I mention that I love Clerks and Clerks 2, and Mallrats is my favorite Kevin Smith film? Bye.